10th Vox Log of Arbites Investigative Alex Salernus, 953-995 M41. In the days following the dismantling of the coup, many members of Cell Sphinx busied themselves in quietly concluding a handful of personal matters on Ramar. That's about all the leave we were afforded. For my part, I got my sanitized report with attached case files to deliver to the highest echelons of the world's Arbites forces, cinching a brief audience with Marshal Piotr Zykov himself. He seemingly approved of my work, and I was granted access to one of the Adeptus' interior shooting ranges down in the sublevels of the headquarters bastion upon my request. There I spent a lot of hours in bolts into developing a feel for one of Draken's old pistols. Given that protracted shootouts against increasingly better-equipped foes seems part of an Inquisitorial Acolyte's job description, I regretfully decided it was time to retire my faithful auto pistol. On the last day of Cell Griffin's time on World, we exchanged farewells with something approaching a genuine sense of melancholy. I think they started to like us near the end. They offloaded some of their equipment on us, myself bagging a photo visor and concealable synth leather holster from Jeremiah's old footlocker, and a well-made pair of magnoculars from Captain Norstrike, a parting gift. Blackwater also showed off some exotic dark-colored sword hilt and rifle, but I haven't the faintest idea where from. Interrogator Marn had received a Vox message from our mutual master containing instructions for both cells, with hers being responsible for the investigation's in-person debriefing, while we were to travel onwards to a night world by the name of Nakajima in the neighboring Shrodnya subsector. We don't know what for, but our tentative cover story is that we belong to a special investigative task force of the Adeptus Administratum. Maybe we're auditing tax returns or something. And we're to liaise with an Agent Rose at our destination. Our Inquisitor sounds like he's taking on a job of his own, finding old Archibald, who's gone missing. Also mentioned was the imminent arrival of an Inquisitor Luther Zarek here in Ramar Primus, who will be responsible for the cleanup as he conducts a thorough combing through of the myriad noble houses. A new replacement arrived during this time as well, introducing himself as a one Abelard Veltrin. A head of neatly kept dirty blonde hair frames his intelligent bright face with an intense stare that hints at some kind of highborn upbringing. Obviously a religious man, the carapace plates beneath his pious vestments in conjunction with the whip and hand flamer on his waist betray him as a priest of some martial talent. A junior confessor, maybe. He certainly has the ornate torch aspect down pat. He'd apparently been slated for attachment to Cell Griffin, but got shunted over to us at the last minute by none other than Van Graff himself. Leaving the other team to their impending departure, we decided it was time to arrange void ship travel via one of our newfound friendships amongst the Romarian nobility. On that subject, it should be mentioned that King Stepanov passed away peacefully in his sleep a short while after the coup's failure, his son Kirill II ascending to the throne with much fanfare amongst the general populace, who were happy now that the recent strife and uncertainty had subsided. Eos of Sienkov, in a landslide snap election within the Chamber of Princes, was elevated to Grand Prince overnight. That was almost certainly what we in the business call a bad idea, but the decision was theirs to make, though his election made getting a hold of him difficult for the first few days. Now we had a chance for a meeting, proceeding to his estate and approaching the household's former head of security, the Justicar Lars. I hadn't really gotten a chance to know the fellow previously, but even as a mere acquaintance I could tell he'd taken his sudden demotion in importance hard. Sienkov was now protected primarily by a flock of royal guard, the kit and professionalism of which Lars's boys couldn't hope to match. Upon meeting him in the mansion, he informed us of his former charge's arrival within the next 3 hours. Apparently, Iosif had some possessions he wanted to retrieve from his room. That would prove difficult, as we were to learn, seeing as the family's psyker had fled the previous night, leaving warp-touched corruption in his wake. The wizard had defiled and trapped his personal cogitator, within which Dark sensed the presence of some kind of corrupted code spirit, just in time to prevent Hire from interfacing with it. We also learned that he had destroyed over a dozen of the household servitors, concentrating their mangled forms in Sienkov's personal study, and that the sight of them had sent numerous house guards reeling with nausea. We decided to check, sending Bright Eyes and the new zealot forward with a picked quarter, but our infiltrator lost his nerve and bolted. Warped corruption of some type permeated the room, the the servitor corpses pasted across the study in grotesque patterns. Knowing we had not the expertise nor the sanctified weaponry for cleansing the site, we cleared everyone out of the building before placing it under quarantine. Sinkov's motorcade arrived on time, and we met him at the house's entry steps where he greeted us enthusiastically. While he was disappointed at being unable to access the interior, he was quick to drop the matter as we put forward our request for aid in arranging off-world travel. He was happy to oblige, and thanked us again for our assistance, however unintentional, in improving his station. We mentioned Inquisitor Zarek, which rung a bell with the young Grand Prince, and he advised he direct the Imperial agent's attention to the corrupted wing of his old mansion as soon as possible. Promising he would, he then proceeded to meander off to drink on his lawn as his bloated entourage deployed chairs and shade umbrellas. His family Justicar looked on, standing apart from the glamorous, shako-clad guardsmen, and unmistakably dejected. I gave him my unopened low stub and a clap on the shoulder before wordlessly departing for Hilaire's van. A short time later, we motored across the twisting carriageways of the city towards one of the Hive Dome's primary satellite aerodromes. Along the way, I paid special attention to the public Vox broadcasts and news bulletins, gaining the impression that the good folks of Ramar were damn near ecstatic at the return of stability to the planet's government. The long-roiling labor riots had collapsed overnight, with the Arbites prosecuting the remaining perpetrators and enablers in short order. Nomine Imperador, nomine Legis. While we waited for the 6 dynastic troopers of Blackwater's retinue to be ferried up to orbit, all of us had several hours of downtime on the rock-crete apron of the spaceport. Among the many topics that came up during the wandering conversations of the group was my history with our Corsair firm Slinger. After some hesitation, we told our respective sides of the story with obvious biases. The look some of the others were giving me as I described my own failing of will was like a knife twisting in my gut. They think less of me now, and maybe even suspect me as something of an unprincipled abstractionist. I sucked down half a pack of glow sticks before the last shuttle. Breaking up our trip into the adjacent subsector for secrecy's sake meant the voyage was extended out to several weeks. Completing the first leg in the lap of luxury, the vessel Siemkov had arranged for us was richly appointed. We put in at the Srodnia capital of Remental before transferring on to a much more modest merchant hauler, the Golden Avenger. These folks were hauling weapons, primarily small arms, trailing down to our ultimate destination. Chatting up some of the crew along the way, they revealed that they make this run about once every solar month. After a few more layovers in intervening systems, we translated into real space, rather violently, approaching our destination. Catching a glimpse of the stage for our next trial through the armor glass of the freighter's bridge, I could see a mountainous world wreathed in clouds, orbited by a quintet of moons. We'd later be told that the second of these, one Beta, was also inhabitable, either by nature or the hand of mankind, and dominated by vast instructions of the Mechanicus. Hanging geosynchronously above the night world is a series of large orbital stations linked together by ribbons of transport scaffolding and tunnels hundreds of kilometers long, studded with freight complexes, dockyards, auger arrays, and more. Altogether, it's referred to as the orbital stratum, and it's the gateway to Nakajima. Disembarking the Golden Avenger along large, environmentally sealed gangway umbilicals at Gate 3 DZ-112, the first thing we set about was getting Blackwater's paramilitary complement a place to stay. While they had convincing enough change of civilian attire each, their olive-drab duffel bags, slung over their shoulders along with their general manner in which they carried themselves, gave them away almost immediately as soldiers. Everyone was issued a local ident by an impassive customs servitor before we left the cargo bay, and it was soon discovered that these F-class base-level credentials were actually more of a hindrance than a help. Nakajimans don't like foreigners. Hilaire was turned away by Havelock superintendents multiple times because of his card before finally securing enough rooms for his mercs. I started getting a lay of the social landscape and noticed at once the tendency for all signage to be displayed in 3 languages, Low and High Gothic, and the local patois. Approaching an eatery on a nearby street corner directly across from the cargo hangar, I also observed a fairly consistent phenotype among most of the dock workers. Shorter, black-haired, pale complexions, and almond-eyed, with dark brown being the dominant iris coloration. Most spoke in a local dialect indecipherable to my ear. Grabbing something to gnash on, I began ingratiating myself with some of the local menials who did know Low Gothic, as Blackwater started taking some other patrons to task for calling him Cura, with snide derision. It seems that, at least around the docks we entered the stratum from, most of the housing and facilities are protected, owned, or just outright ran by a collection of undesirables known as Udo. I also learned from the workers I ate lunch next to that the bulk of the freight that comes through the ring is foodstuffs destined for the planet's surface. 10 billion souls down there, allegedly. Outgoing goods tended to be related to the well-developed mining industry on the surface. When I asked where I might find an Adeptus Administratum office, I was directed north, relatively, and told of the orbital stratum Citadel, positioned directly over the Nakajiman capital below. There was even an auto-carriage deck reachable by an industrial lift. As I thanked the locals whom I'd been talking to, one of them deigned to flash a tattoo in red ink of a character in the local lingo, most likely meaning Udo, if the non-existent dialogus in me had to guess. Regarding perceivable ecclesiastical influence on the populace and just overall participation in worship, I'd say the number of devotional shrines and ministorum chapels would rank relatively average for the sector. Of note was a promotional flyer soliciting for pious women to join the Adeptus Sororitas nunnery at the Abbey of the Setting Sun. I suspect the order is located planetside, but couldn't make out any directions or contact information. There's also some kind of festival or holiday tied closely to the world's nobility kicking off in 6 days. It involves the opening up of the strategic granaries for the common populace. Apparently society is heavily caste-based around here. At any rate, Blackwater retrieved his auto carriage and we got up onto the transit decks without issue. Despite there being a dedicated level for rail-based freight, the traffic on the dozen-lane carriageway was still heavy. Either we caught the local rush hour at the worst time, or everyone and their dog had a hearing at the Citadel at just that moment. Stopping 3/4 of the way through the trip for Prometheum, Hilaire pulled his van into a modestly sized fuel station with about 40 pumps. As the others filled up, I grabbed a snack from the main kiosk before a distinct rhythmic slapping sound caught my attention. Pulling up was an Arbides squad car with a flat tire, the replacement of which the two occupants immediately set to doing after they rolled to a stop. Wandering over to offer help, the senior of the two, who had now switched over to pumping fuel as the subordinate struggled with a jack, politely declined. Making small talk by asking for directions that I already knew, I noted the names embossed on their Adeptus idents as investigators Li and Zhang. Blackwater, then having finished refueling his van, I bid the two patrolmen adieu and joined the rest of Sphinx. Exploring some of the roads between towering hab blocks before returning to the carriageway, we were quickly halted by a clump of hooligans wielding pipes and planks, demanding a 10-script toll. Hilaire stuck a muzzle in their faces before driving off, leaving them cross and flashing yellow ink tattoos as a kind of warning for our insolence. A short ways away, we stopped at a kind of automated junk shop pet selling all sorts of local curios. Naturally, I picked up a ceramic mug emblazoned with I Heart Nakajima in 3 languages. As we left to return to the main expressway, some graffiti depicting a green stylized snake caught my eye with Uja scrawled underneath it. During the final approach to the Citadel, now looming ahead of us, as a series of connected spires several kilometers high, I spotted another Arbides beat officer on the main carriageway astride an autobike. Accentuated by the form-fitting leathers of such a position's uniform, the figure was unmistakably feminine. Pointing this out to our licentious driver, the Corsair promptly committed a half-dozen moving violations to bring his window within shouting, distance with the officer. Raising her tinted helmet visor revealed dark slanted eyes set above a small mouth and pointed chin, with a platinum-colored bob cut visible beneath the headgear. Her ident read Agent Park, and though she remained curt through the whole interaction, she did accept one of those contact cards Blackwater printed up recently before speeding off after another motorist who switched lanes without having signaled. Anyway, we're now held up in the jam of traffic around one of the Citadel's primary entrances as we wait to be cleared through a series of security checkpoints. Well, I can see hundreds of our BDs and local enforcers working furiously to keep things moving. It looks like they really ought to have thousands. Wanting to stretch my legs, I filled up my new mug from a fresh pot set up in the back of the van before wandering off to the side of the accessway, giving me a chance to record this. Oh, looks like folks are moving again. In Vox Log.